Welcome to SAM Conversation, program of South Asia Monitor. Today, our topic is His Holiness Dalai Lama's assertion on reincarnation. To discuss this, it is our pleasure to welcome Mr. Tenzin Lekshay, the spokesperson and Additional Secretary, International Relations, Central Tibet Administration. In 1950, the Chinese captured Tibet, and 9 years later, in 1959, the situation became it became quite precarious for His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and he was advised that he should get away. And he did. It was a perilous journey. And in my book, China, Bloodies, Bulletless Borders, I have a few photographs of his entry into India. This is the book. It was released in 2022. And these are the photographs of His Holiness the Dalai Lama entering India and being escorted by the 5th Battalion of the Assam Rifles. In this book, the very first sentence, I make it clear that it is China occupied Tibet. It's not China. It's not the India-China border. It is the India-Tibet border, a Tibet which was captured illegally by China and has remained so since then. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has just turned 90 on the 6th of this month, and it is heartening to hear that he has been very gently but very firmly, quite assertive in stating and clarifying that his successor will be a reincarnation recognized by the Tibetans and not by the Chinese. There is too long a list of all the kind of exploitation and horrible treatment that has been meted out by the Chinese to the Tibetans who are there. Mr. Lekshay, I'll request you to give us, I think it's a very important phase in the Dalai Lama's life and for all of you. Could you please explain to us?
Thank you, Colonel Anil, and thank you for South Asia Monitor for giving me this opportunity to talk about His Holiness and the Tibetan cause. So, His Holiness the Dalai Lama is a savior of Tibetan people. His Holiness the Dalai Lama is the manifestation of a lot of compassion. That is Avalokiteshvara, who is the guardian of Tibetan people. His Holiness is our leader. Since then, right, and even now. So over the last, as you rightly said, His Holiness made a perilous journey to India, right, coming to exile because China occupied Tibet. And His Holiness, over so many years, tried to negotiate with His Holiness, with Chinese Communist regime. But because of the Chinese, they have the different design to occupy Tibet. Not just for Tibet, but to control all over the world, especially Asia. Tibet was a palm for them to expand towards all the South Asian countries, Central Asia. So therefore, His Holiness was forced to come into India. His Holiness escaped in India and he was followed by 80,000 Tibetans. And over the last so many years, His Holiness has been consistently working on to negotiate on the Tibetan cause, Sino-Tibetan conflict, which has been long pending. But China was the one who do not have any political will to resolve this conflict. Right. So not only that, China has been saying over the years that this is the stature of His Holiness, not of 6 million Tibetan people. Right. All through the time, they were only talking about the stature of His Holiness, Dalai Lama. But His Holiness says that, no, it is not just about me, but the cause is about the 6 million Tibetan people. Now, over the years, what they've been claiming, because that they know that His Holiness, if His Holiness lived longer, then China will have a difficult time, right, in ruling Tibet. Though they might have physically ruled Tibet, but the Tibetan people's heart, and mind, and souls are all with His Holiness in India. Right? They might have physically ruled Tibet, but they could not win the hearts of the Tibetan people for the last 70 years. So what they have been doing is, over the last so many years, they said that if you have to kill a serpent, you have to, right, chop the heads. You have to cut the heads of the serpent. So His Holiness for them is a serpent's head. Over the last so many years, His Holiness has been, right, called by different, right, demeaning names, like a monks in wolf's robe. Sometimes he's a splittist. Sometimes he's a separatist. Sometimes he was called as a demon by the Chinese. They were the one. Now they are all passionate about, right, getting the authority of incarnation of Dalai Lama. They should know that they were the one once time that they were ready to kill His Holiness. They were ready to tell them that he is just not a religious person, but a political person. Over the years, even now they have been saying that His Holiness Dalai Lama is not a religious figure, but a political person, right? So therefore, but they were so much engrossed in getting the authority of the reincarnation of Dalai Lama. Since 1969, His Holiness has stated, since 1969, when His Holiness was young, His Holiness has stated that whether the Dalai Lama institution should remain or not has to be dependent on the wishes of the Tibetan people. If the Tibetan people wishes the Dalai Lama's institution remain, right, then it is obvious that His Holiness will come, right? And His Holiness also made a lengthy statement in 2011, in September 24th, that he will consult with all the high lamas of Tibetan Buddhist traditions, Tibetan public, and all the concerned officers or people who follow Tibetan Buddhism, whether the institution of Dalai Lama should remain or not. Now, after 14 years, His Holiness has confirmed and affirmed with clarity. Graciously, His Holiness said that now, with 14 years, all the Tibetan people, inside and outside, but all these Himalayan people, all these people from Mongolia, Russian Federations, even from Chinese people from China, mainland China, had appealed over so many years for the institution to remain. Therefore, His Holiness this time had made it very clear that the institution of Dalai Lama will continue. That's a very good news for us, right? But we have to also understand that His Holiness over years has stated many times that if the Tibet situation remains unchanged, he'll be born in free world, right? If the Tibetan, His Holiness also stated many times that if the Tibetan people wishes him to come, he'll come. So now there is a confirmation, there is an affirmation from His Holiness that His Holiness, the Dalai Lama's institution will continue, right? So for that, the sole authority on the reincarnation of Dalai Lama remains with His Holiness alone, nobody else, not even the Chinese regime. Right? Why? Because Chinese communist regime, one time in early 1954, when His Holiness visited China, Mao Zedong told His Holiness that religion is poison. Right? They don't believe in religion. Since that moment, till date, they being the destroyer of faiths. They were the one who destroyed the faiths. We used to say that more than 6,000 monasteries were destroyed. We are saying that all through the time, the Tibetan monks and nuns and all these practitioners were being incarcerated, tortured, killed. They have exploited the Tibetan religion. They have destroyed the Tibetan religion. Now, how come the destroyer of the faith be the one who has the authority on this unique Tibetan Buddhist tradition? They are not at all a Buddhist tradition, first thing. They do not belong to the Buddhist tradition. So how can a one who is outside of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition to have the authority on the Buddhist tradition? So there is nowhere. This is a logical reason. Now the second part is historical reason. The Dalai Lama institution has been there over 600 years. This is the 14th Dalai Lama. So all through the 600 years, the China has been saying that they have the legitimate role to play. Why? Because they have been claiming that in 1792, as per the Ordinance 29 Ordinance, they have the authority by using the golden urn. That was only in 1792, in 18th century. But we are talking about 600-year-old tradition of this institution. So therefore, they do not have even the historical legacy and authority on the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. In fact, if you can check now in 1792, when they are talking about this golden urn by Qianlong, the Chinese emperor, where are the records in the emperor's record which claim that they have the authority? No, the Chinese communist regime, they are remaking the histories by simply getting their own ownership and the authority on this reincarnation, because they want this to be on the political side. They are not in comfort with the religious faith or the tradition, but rather they want to use this institution, use this reincarnation as a tool for their political interests. So therefore, there is nowhere that China has any legitimate role to play on the reincarnation issue of His Holiness.
What about what was the full story about the last Panchen Lama?
So now, over the last, I would say that last month, when I met with one foreign journalist from China, he told me that they met with a Chinese leader, and they claim that China will have a Dalai Lama, a next Dalai Lama, and they said that they have 6 to 7 million Tibetan with them. They claim
6 to 7 million Tibetans with them. I see.
With them,
I see.
By claiming that they have the legitimate right for the reincarnation for next Dalai Lama. Now, see, now the question is, do these 6 to 7 million Tibetans have the faith on the Chinese leaders? Right. Simple example, the classic example is Chinese pension. His Holiness in 1995 appointed a 6-year-old child as the reincarnation of Tenzin Lama. 3 days after, he was just 6 years old. 3 days after the appointment, China kidnapped that boy, his parents, and the selector, a person who is responsible for the selection of the Panchen Lama. It's been over 30 years now. Nobody knows about the well-being of
The
that.
whereabouts.
Nobody knows about the whereabouts of that child and his parents, and then the well-being of that child for the last 30 years. China claimed that he was happy, he did not want to be disturbed. But how can China have the competence to show when they have selected their own Tenzin Lama, right? So when they chosen Tenzin Lama, do not stay in the Sikh monastery in Tashilumbung. Their Tenzin Lama remains in Beijing all the time. And when and if they needed him to show to the world that good things are happening in Tibet, he will only be traveled to Tibet. And during that time, all the Tibetan people throughout wherever he's visiting were compelled to go and bow down. Otherwise, they will be penalized. Just as, Colonel, might have heard about Hungar Doji, who had mysteriously passed away quite recently in March this year in Vietnam. He escaped from Tibet to Vietnam with the fear of being tortured, being imprisoned, because when Chinese pension visits his monastery, the Chinese authority told him that all the protocols have to be done. But he was reluctant to do that because he did not believe in that Chinese pension. Right. So all through the time, right, the Tibetan people do not believe in the Chinese pension. Otherwise, simple reason is inside Tibet, we will not even see his photo in public domain. He has no market at all. He has no faith from the people, no reference. Only he became a puppet and the tool for the Chinese to show to the world that something is good happening inside Tibet. But the real one is still kidnapped and unknown to all the people. So therefore, for China, this is the reality, how they treat the Buddhist leaders. And we have many number of Buddhist leaders who have been killed and tortured over the years, over the decades.
We've over the past decades, one has heard so often. I don't know. Is there any kind of figure that you have of how many monks have been killed? Because we've been hearing over the decades from from a number of quarters that and China is it's an iron curtain as far as information is concerned. So it's not, and they all on top of that they are liars, outright liars. The Communist Party of China, it's very basic philosophy is lying.
That's true. That's true, Colonel. So over the years now, if you look at Tibet issue, they claim that Tibet was part of China. Now, over the years, what they've been justifying their claim is that at one point of time, they said that Tibet was part of China since 7th century, during the 33rd king of Tibet. And it didn't work out well in their favor. Then they come down to the 13th century during the Mongols' time. Right. Again, it didn't go well as per their narratives. So what we are saying is, whenever China put their fingers in the recorded history of Tibet, they will always burn their fingers. So now Xi Jinping has been telling the world that Tibet was part of China since time immemorial. Unknown history. Even China do not know. Even China do not know that Tibet was part of China since then, right? Because we have a very unique culture, tradition, history, and we've been neighbor for all the millennia. China know that. but they keep on lying and remaking history for the sake of their present political, right, convenience. And it will not go well with them in the future.
No, it's a bottomless greed that they have, of which Tibet is. They made claims on so many parts of India, Arunachal. I mean, they've tried all kinds of means to grab territory here and there whenever possible. And with us, the last time that they're very smart. In 1967, there were some skirmishes in Nathula, Chola, in Sikkim. They our commanders thought that if they made a barbed wire fencing, it would at least it would a lot of daily arguing about this is not your land, that would be avoided, but they just couldn't stand it. Every time the Indian soldiers picked up a picket and to do any digging, they'd start firing at us. They in fact started firing even artillery, and we responded back with artillery. And for us, then the permission to use artillery for Indian Army came from the Prime Minister, who at that time was looking after the defense portfolio also. And we lost 67, they lost about 400. After that, they pressed very hard that let's not fire at each other. And they've taken great advantage of that agreement. Even in 2020, when they attacked in Galwan, they attacked with the ancient medieval rods with wires tied, all kinds of crude medieval weapons. And of course, they killed 20 of us, and they in the reaction by Indian soldiers, officially they lost 43, but the actual figure is according to certain satellite reports also may have gone up to about 100. Anyway, there is absolutely no end to the greed, and all this was done after they contaminated the whole world with COVID-19. Now, it's very heartening that His Holiness the Dalai Lama has expressed that this reincarnation will be decided by the Tibetan people here. Now, does that mean that the next Dalai Lama will be kept here in India, in Dharamsala?
So now,
would it be safer?
Colonel Anil, now first thing first, right? Now, first thing first, His Holiness said that the institution will continue. There is an affirmation that the institution of Dalai Lama will continue. Now, second thing is that all the responsibilities are shouldered or entrusted upon the Guardian Important Trust. But that's the office of His Holiness, since it's been existing since from the first Dalai Lama's time, right? One thing. And now the third thing is that the process will be in consultation with the High Lamas and the oath-bound protectors who were linked with the Dalai Lama institutions for centuries, right? So therefore, this is the ultimate thing right now. Now, the second thing now, the matter which we have to look into now is quite 2 days back when we had the long life puja of His Holiness, when we celebrate His Holiness' birthday. His Holiness told everyone that he will live up to 135 years. Right. And His Holiness, when he's at 90, at an advanced age, but His Holiness' health is more than ever. He's healthier, his radiance, right, shower all through the world. We have seen the birthday celebration. We have a very small palace or the residence and the temple in Dharamsala. It's overcrowded, not just by the Tibetan people, but Himalayan people, people from all over the world comes and celebrate
Yes, yes.
joyous moment of the 90th birthday of His Holiness. This is a historic moment for us. So for us right now, what we've been saying, because His Holiness also has concluded during his birthday celebration, he said that throughout his life, he has practiced compassion, even to China, right? So all his followers should also practice compassion to all the humanities. That's a very good, I would say, that's a very nice advice and the wisdom which His Holiness has shared even now. Let's not hate each other. Let's all embrace compassion, right? Even to Chinese people. So I would say that right now, right, because China, as Colonel, you have rightly stated, right? Because we don't know China. China has always been suspicious all the time to all the people, to all the nation, not just about India, even to Tibetans. We lost our country, but still China remains suspicious to us. Right. So now the problem is but why China remains suspicious all the time? Whether it's a peacetime or wartime, no matter when, every time China remains suspicious. So to my knowledge, little knowledge, I said that why? Because China, all through the centuries, they try to master on these Sun Tzu's art of war. All through the generations, even now under Xi Jinping, they are reading this Sun Tzu's art of war, how to win over others by deceiving, by killing, by torturing, by maneuvering, all the things which always remain suspicious, which always
But
make
you know, then
others suspicious.
All this cruelty is only against people who are defenseless.
Yes.
With
Yes.
those who can fire back at them, they can't face them. That is why they in 1967, they pressed us for that agreement of peace and tranquility and not firing at each other.
So they learn this art of war, how to deceive others. Right. Now the question is, will China be able to continue with this, the mentality of suspicious, of deceiving others, with this belligerent? Will it work for China in the coming years?
You have a point. When you hold on to something by means of lies and deception, there's I think a limit to how long you can do so.
That's true. That's why we always say this. That's why, Colonel, we always say that no matter how hardship the Tibetan cause we are facing, right, but truth must prevail, and truth shall prevail one day. So we always remain hopeful that even though we are small, even though we've been marginalized all through the time, but we always remain hopeful that the truth will prevail, no matter how big China is. But over the last 70 years, they always remain fearful.
Oh, at any stage, if you mention Tibet to them, then they get into paroxysm of anger,
That's true.
into
That's
paroxysm of anger. That's their reaction. It's like a red rag to a bull. And India has been very restrained in um, in at least saying it. What matters is that we have held our ground as far as the our support to the Tibetan people, to His Holiness the Dalai Lama is concerned. It is there, unquestioningly, and will remain so. I have no doubt about that. And I feel that if for the next reincarnation, it maybe maybe a safer and to let him be in India, because they cannot dare to lift they cannot dare to enter India and try anything like picking anyone up.
so, Colonel, see, over the last 60 years, right, His Holiness has stated many times that he enjoys the freedom in India. Though His Holiness is stateless, His Holiness has been given a prestige of being honored with the guest of India for so long. His Holiness said, I'm the longest guest of India. Right. And not only being a guest, His Holiness has been saying that he's a son of India.
No, he's a very honored guest. He's a very loved guest.
Yes, all over the India is being loved and revered, right, by all, right, all.
And he's really been an apostle of peace. He's a living example, of peaceful, of being peaceful, and one wishes him a long life, and it it is one hopes and prays that this reincarnation process is carried out smoothly to the satisfaction of the Tibetan people.
Thank you, thank you. And I would also like to conclude by saying that, well, with the help and support from the government of India and the people of India, but our cause is still strong enough, right, to challenge the Chinese male violence, right, the torturous one. Even though we are living at a very critical time, right, of the fear of this, right, existential threat imposed upon us by the Chinese through various means. But we have a support. We have a support and solidarity from all over the world, especially India. So I would like to thank all my Indian brothers and sisters on behalf of all the Tibetan people for all the things that India had done for us. And one thing need to also understand is, if Tibet suffers, India suffers. Right. So therefore, as we rightly said, that the Tibet cause is not just for the cause of the Tibetan people, but is a pro-justice and for the humanity. So therefore, we are more than ever.
All I can say is that as far as all the Tibetans who are in India, I'm very sure that they will remain safe, and by God's grace, may a day come when things change in China, and I don't know.
It will. One day it will. The change is the only constant thing. One wishes for is a positive change And as a matter of fact, Donald, because in China, as His Holiness, if you have seen the statement, recent statement, even the Chinese people from China have requested His Holiness that the institution of Dalai Lama should remain. That means there were hundreds and thousands and millions of followers of Tibetan Buddhism in China. So therefore, and as a matter of fact, if they follow the Tibetan Buddhism, as we said, that the Tibetan Buddhism is rooted in ancient Indian Nalanda tradition, and India is our guru, right? And India has a more role to play, even on China's play.
Thank you, Mr. Lekshay. Thank you very much for
Thank you,
all your inputs, and all the best to His Highness and to all the Tibetan people.
Thank you so much, Colonel. Thank you. It was a pleasure meeting you again. Thank you.